everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. See a few people joining. Welcome. Just give everyone a few minutes to join in. Hello, colleagues from Egypt, Morocco, Allah, Maria, Ghana, welcome. Burkina Faso, bonjour. Okay. Ethiopia, hello. Washington, D.C. represented, hello. Great to have you all. As we wait, just a few housekeeping items. Please note that we have simultaneous interpretation today. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little and more, I think under more, you should see interpretation, and you can select French or English. Wonderful. At the beginning of the session, we will also be limiting this to a webinar. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat function and we will respond to you in the chat. Okay, Ed, I think that we can get started now.
Okay. Good. So over to me, right?
So please go ahead.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning to those who are on the other side of the Atlantic in the US and Canada. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you all to this peer learning event, which is been captured reform delivery, lessons on implementation. My name is Edward Brown, and I'm the Senior Director for Research Policy Programs at ACET. For those of you who may not be familiar, let me just say a few words. We are a policy, Pan-African policy think tank, based in Accra. We also have branches in, a branch in Washington, where Frida is calling from. And we provide research, advisory, and advocacy support to help African countries in their efforts to transform their economies. And for transformation, I wouldn't go into too much details, but just to briefly say that We at ACET define economic transformation as growth with depth. And saying growth with depth means that growth is not enough to transform economies, but you also need to undertake a number of strategic reform and structural policy reforms to grow the economy. In particular, the emphasis is on diversification of the production base, export competitiveness, increasing productivity, technological upgrading, and of course, promoting human well-being. So we call that growth with depth. This event is being hosted in collaboration with the World Bank as part of the G20 Compact with Africa. And this meeting has been extended to other CWA stakeholders. So I imagine that many of those participating may not be fully aware of what the compact is. So if you indulge me, for a moment, to give just an overview of what the CWA entails. It's a compact with Africa, which means that it is not for Africa, but with Africa's partnership between the G20 countries with Africa. And it was first launched in 2017 under the German presidency. So it was an initiative which was government promote as the development landscape, the financial development landscape in the world, global development landscape has been shifting, and greater emphasis is being. Compact has three main components. One is to support microeconomic stabilization in the countries, and the second is to continue to support doing business, the business climate in the countries, to crowd in private capital. And the third leg of this compact is also to crowd in private capital financing, to ensure that the private sector is growing in a way that is transformative. It brings together, the compact brings together 12 countries that have voluntarily accepted to be part of it, but it also includes development. A variety of
apologies, we're getting some feedback. If everyone could mute, please, if you're not speaking. Thank you.
Also, a number of bilaterals. Yes, countries have proposed numerous reforms supporting these three key pillars of the compact. And the macro framework is to sort of support fiscal consolidation, improving public procurement and investments reforms in the countries. This also includes reforms to state-owned enterprises, all the various macro and monetary policies that would create stabilization and crowding private sector. The first main pillar. The second pillar, as I said earlier, is to form the business environment to be able to crowd in private capital. Encourage private capital to include support to, the development of green bonds, SME investments, funds, and agricultural de-risking facilities, and so on. So these are the three core pillars of the compact. Now, the delivery process for all countries. This protocol requires prioritization, coordination, effective leadership, and monitoring of the activities under the compact. Is to facilitate discussions around the optimization of existing reform delivery processes and how the CWA program can add value to already complex processes. From the beginning, a number of countries have set up mechanisms to coordinate the various pillars at their country level, and there were matrices that have been defined. And in fact, under the program, the IMF had a portal which basically, it reviews and evaluates the progress being made on the Compact program. And annually, there is always a review of the impact of the Compact. ACET is a third-party reviewer that provides some analysis on what the impact has been for the year. And we also, just as we're doing now, promote peer-to-peer learning to deepen partnerships and to ensure traction on the policy reforms. So before we deep dive into the program today, I would like to turn to my colleague again, Frida, who is the Senior Manager for Infrastructure and Innovations at ACET, who will take us through the agenda and moderate the program today. So over to you, Frida. I wish everyone a successful deliberation on this.
Thank you so much, Ed. Appreciate your welcome remarks. Before we deep dive into our speakers today, a few more reminders for everyone. Please use the chat, as I mentioned before, in case you have any questions, or if you just need anything, we will be checking the chat if you have any questions. Secondly, please note that today's meeting is being recorded. So if you have any issues with that, please send me a direct message. But that is to enable us to be able to send you back a summary of what happened today. And finally, at the end of today's session, we will be asking you to take a brief poll to let us know how we did. So please do not ignore that. It'll take you just a minute to let us know how we did. So on to today's agenda. We have a great agenda, packed agenda. We're very excited to have all the countries here today. We unfortunately do have regrets from our co-chairs who are currently in G20 meetings today. They could not join us. However, they wanted to express their sincere apologies and thank you all for joining us today. We will first start with an overview of reform delivery lessons from our colleague Sylvia Solf from the World Bank. Then we will go into a country roundtable and discussion. We are excited to have all 12 countries here today. And so as you told us last year, that we needed to have more of these sessions where countries are able to engage with each other and learn from each other. We're excited to have this forum where you can hear from your own peers and have any questions that you have for other countries about how they're doing. After that, we will have some case studies from our two colleagues, Janat Hassad from McKinsey, as well as Stephen Poole, who is a former UK Cabinet Office member and an expert, sharing some lessons from both of their perspectives, both private sector and public sector. And then we have just a few final reminders before we close. So without much further ado, it is my privilege to introduce our next speaker, Sylvia. Sylvia, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Great. Sylvia is the global lead for business regulation in the finance, competitiveness, and innovation practice of the World Bank, where she currently oversees a portfolio of business regulation reform programs in over 60 countries worldwide. She has led trainings and workshops on regulatory reform around the world and has traveled to over 70 countries researching or advising governments on investment climate reform. Prior to joining the World Bank, she worked on portfolio management at the Inter-American Development Bank, as well as in the private and nonprofit sectors in Chile and Mexico. So Sylvia, it is a pleasure to welcome you. Please go ahead, take over. You're welcome to share your screen.
Can everybody see the presentation, just to confirm, Freda?
Yes, we can see
Excellent.
it, but we see it in presenter mode.
Let me see. I can change that.
Top right corner, there's view. In the top right corner. Oh no, that's not me.
My apologies for this.
No worries, we can go with it.
All right, I'll start with this. So before I dive into a very brief presentation, I just want to say that it's really there couldn't be a more opportune time to to have this discussion and to have this forum. We are in a crisis context, but there's also tremendous opportunities, or there are tremendous opportunities in terms of leveraging technology, using the crisis as an opportunity to reform. And I also want to acknowledge the knowledge that is in this virtual room. We are speaking here about reform delivery. The majority of countries presented here have reform committees, reform delivery units, cellules de climat des affaires. So there's a lot of knowledge here, and it's really the Compact for Africa really provides a fantastic platform to share knowledge and to amongst each other, and also, as was already mentioned, to take this as an opportunity to see how can possibly the current mechanisms be optimized. So starting a little bit from the business and investor point of view, when we think about the investment climate, from the investor point of view, the firm's point of view, here in the middle, we can see that there's numerous policies, institutions that impact the day-to-day life of a firm, the behavior, as well as the decision-making and the decision to invest or not. And that, of course, from the public sector side, I mean, not just to name a few of these areas, ranging from factor markets, labor and land, also fiscal policies, customs, sectoral policies, law enforcement. All of these different institutions are in one way or another interacting with the investor and the firm throughout the life of the company. So from the public sector point of view, of course, when thinking about how to optimize and reform the investment climate, that also poses challenges, very similar challenges actually to the challenges that the firm is facing in terms of coordination among the agencies. Sometimes there is a hesitance to share information among the agencies, which then results in greater efficiency, resistance or delays in reform adoption, overlapping functions. Sometimes also we see that even though countries have put in place mechanisms to support reforms, there are too many of them. That is also something that we quite often see, as well as, of course, in many countries, depending on the degree of decentralization, there can be challenges across levels of governments between national and subnational entities. Very briefly, and this is known to many present here, some of the principles or strategies that have worked regardless of the characteristic or background or characteristics of the economy of the country that have worked in implementing reforms can be summarized as, number one, really leadership at the highest level and clear accountability mechanisms, a long-term vision and very clear objectives, an inclusive reform process which involves and takes into account all stakeholders, but also translating a high-level vision into detailed action plans and actual measurable outcomes and results that are monitored and tracked. And last but not least, and we'll have the opportunity to hear from my fellow speakers on this part as well, to really involve the private sector to make sure that the reforms put in place have traction and reach the intended beneficiaries. How countries are organizing themselves varies greatly, and I don't think there is a prescription in terms of this is the kind of institution you really need. I would say there are certain features that are really quite critical, and from our experience, having had the opportunity to work globally with a number of governments, is that if one of these levels is not present, oftentimes that can hinder the reform process. So I will very briefly go over this, and this presentation will be shared, I'm assuming, with all the participants afterwards as well. But at the very top, it's really a high-level oversight mechanism. This is to set the broad direction. It's a high-level vision. It's buy-in from the top, so there's really ownership at the highest level. But also, very importantly, to set broad goals, broad results goals, and to be able to unblock any delays or obstacles that will occur. It's guaranteed that those will occur throughout the reform process. At that level, and this is really at the presidents, prime ministers, or a powerful ministry level, could be the Ministry of Finance, there is no time to go into the day-to-day and the nitty-gritty and the technical solution design. So the second level is usually a coordinating level. It can be a secretariat, it can be a delivery unit, it can be a committee, but these are generally technical, more technically oriented staff that have an oversight of the entire reform agenda, which can be multifaceted and quite complex, have an oversight of the key performance indicators, the reform roadmaps, and they really ensure that the process is moving forward. They are also critical in being able to escalate issues that arise at the technical level and may need political decision-making to unblock them or prioritization. The third level is really the technical level, and that's where also the involvement of a broad range of stakeholders is important. This is about reform design. It can be legal designs, it can be policies, it can be administrative reforms, it can be leveraging technology to improve service delivery. Whatever it may be, it's critical to identify who are the key people that have to be in the room, who are the technicians that can really design the reforms and then actually implement it. However, if at that level, there's no way to unblock or to escalate issues, sometimes it gets stuck. So what's even more important than having those three levels is the relationship between them, a very clear line of sight from the very top to the very bottom in terms of results, as well as a way to escalate and to unblock and prioritize along the way throughout the three levels from the very bottom to the very top. Just very quickly, a few examples on how do we ensure such accountability. So Malaysia was quite on the forefront of this at the time, and used even a specialized app to track weekly and monthly progress of the key performance indicators of the ministries. And if anything got stuck, it would be a review, and this would be a tripartite review between the Prime Minister, the Chief of Staff, as well as the Ministry of Finance and Budget, to see what are the priorities, what has to be unblocked. In the UK, it was a combination, and I will not go too much into this because we have the true expert of the UK here, but it was a mixture of, number one, having clear results goals. Here in this case, it was red tape and a measure of simplification and reduction of bureaucracy in terms of the cost that it took for the private and public sectors, and also involving the public in understanding what are really the issues that are bothering you the most, so to speak. So where are the greatest opportunities for reform? Another way of ensuring accountability and this line of sight throughout the process, not only once the reforms are happening, but also in the priority setting, is the private sector involvement. And here, I prefer to say user involvement, so to speak, the user of the services provided by the government, because the private sector is very multifaceted. So one single public-private dialogue mechanism may not be the so to speak, the solution for everything, unless it is truly representative. But also there are numerous ways of gathering input from the private sector in the reform design, in the identification of the issues. Countries such as Singapore, UK, Mauritius are leveraging business associations, are leveraging surveys to understand, depending on the characteristics and the type of the company, what are some of the main issues. They also use business reference panels to see to test reform proposals, reform drafts, policy proposals, see where might be their resistance, how could it potentially impact firms and businesses. And then, of course, once the reform is happening, it is absolutely critical to make sure that the public knows about the reform, that the public sector also knows about the reform. Their big challenge is often that you have reform support at the highest level, but then on the front line, the officers may not be aware of it. But also that this feedback gets, again, communicated back to the government, back to the reform delivery unit, coordinating unit, as well as to the highest level of the presidency, to make sure that the reforms actually have traction. Transparency is, so to speak, the the best way also to ensure that that everybody knows what's happening. So just another example from India. India publishes an annual report, and something that I would like to draw the attention to. The report is not only a presentation of the reforms that were undertaken by the government, but also, and that is a lesson that India learned over time when implementing subnational reform, is that a lot of information can be obtained by the public sector, but critically is to see how does the private sector respond. So India did this in two ways. So here we can see there's a startup recognition heat map to see in terms of how many number of startups are happening in the different states. India also rolled out a monitoring mechanism to monitor implementation of a subnational reform action plan, and in the second or third year introduced private sector surveys to make sure that the reforms that are reported by the public sector are actually taken up by the private sector. So just to conclude very quickly, to wrap up, as we all know, it's not only about what to reform, it's about how to reform, how to set priorities. Very critical is that a high-level vision is in place, but it has to be translated. It has to be grounded with performance targets and action plans. Institutionalized leadership with clear mandates, no overlapping mandates, clear protocols for interagency coordination, and escalation and arbitration mechanisms are critical also to keep the reform process agile. Things will change, priorities will shift, especially right now in this very dynamic context. So unless there is an ability to quickly readjust but without overlaps, without confusion, it's going to hinder or delay the reform process. Incentives have to be in place, and there's numerous ways of providing incentives. It really depends on the country context. And last but not least, and this brings me back to the very first image that I showed here in the presentation, it is always about keeping the end user beneficiary in mind. Any policy, anything designed should come from the firm or the investor perspective and not from the public sector perspective. That is often the biggest challenge for reform. A few resources available. I think some of them have been shared already. The number of publications. We also have publications for reforming at the subnational level. So this is really just capturing lessons from around the globe, depending how centralized or decentralized countries were. It's very different, the reform process in Malaysia compared to, for example, Canada. Canada is very consensus-driven, very decentralized, versus Malaysia is much more centralized and structured. As well as we also are doing training and peer learning, and the World Bank can play a role in facilitating peer learning. And again, just to say, this platform is really a fantastic platform to encourage this peer learning, or to enable peer learning across the different countries. So with that, I would like to conclude, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for that great overview. Key takeaways for me, we need to have targets, we need to have clear leadership, incentives, and keeping the user in mind. Very much appreciated. So we are at 9:30 and 1:30 for some, and ready to dive into the country discussions, which we are all waiting for. I would like to invite my colleague Vincent Palmade, who is the lead economist in the World Bank, to join me as we co-moderate this session. So Vincent, few words from you.
Thank you, Frida, and thank you all for joining us for this workshop. As Frida said, it's really about you and sharing your experiences, what has worked, what the challenges you're facing, and very importantly, how the compact with Africa can help you going forward to really reinforce your reform delivery institutions, capacity, processes. And we will hear from a number of you who have already leveraged the compact to that effect. And as Sylvia said, sometimes the problem is too many committees, too many teams trying to do reforms. And the last thing we want to do with the compact is to create yet another committee specifically for the compact, or what we would like to encourage countries to do is to use the compact to consolidate and reinforce their reform delivery capacity, as opposed to creating another, special committee. And I think we will hear from countries how they are managing to do that with the support of technical assistance, which is being financed through the Compact with Africa. So I won't say more, but again, thank you and looking forward to the discussion.
Excellent. Thank you, Hassan. Just a reminder for those who are recently joining us that we do have simultaneous translation available. Just look at, you'll see a globe on the bottom. Feel free to choose either English or French. And our country colleagues, we invite you to join us. We will be going in alphabetical order, as you know, by country. And we will invite you to, when you are called, to turn on your video, unmute yourself, and share with us within just 5 minutes your perspective from your country, answering the 3 questions that we shared with you. So first on our list is our colleagues from Burkina Faso. Monsieur Ouedraogo, we have given you permission technically to speak. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. Welcome. Monsieur Ouedraogo? I see he's unmuted, but I can't hear you. We can't hear you. Please give us a signal if you can hear us. Okay, you can hear us. Let's see. Okay, Monsieur Ouedraogo, we will come back to you. Okay, Monsieur Ouedraogo, we'll come back to you in just a few minutes. My colleagues from Benin are also experiencing technical difficulties, so we're going to start with Côte d'Ivoire. Monsieur Tano, are you here? Yes, I see you. Could you please unmute?
Ok, est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui.
Je dirais en français, est-ce que vous m'entendez? Can you hear me? Ok, est-ce que vous m'entendez? C'est bon? Can you hear me, please? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Tano.
Okay, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. Merci encore pour l'initiative prise d'organiser en fait ce séminaire qui nous pensons est très intéressant avec déjà la première présentation que nous avons vue qui passe un peu en revue, un peu comment on structure l'exécution des réformes. Ceci dit, pour répondre en fait aux 3 questions, pour revenir à la première question qui est de savoir qu'est-ce qui a bien marché au niveau de l'exécution des réformes, du processus d'exécution des réformes, on voudrait souligner qu'à notre niveau, en fait, en Côte d'Ivoire, depuis un certain temps, on est fortement engagé dans la mise en œuvre des réformes. Et donc, pour ça, il y a même un ministère qui a été créé, qui est dédié à l'exécution des réformes et puis à la promotion de l'investissement privé. Donc, c'est ce ministère-là qui est en fait plus ou moins le leader de tout ce qui est en fait l'exécution des réformes à proprement dit. Mais bien évidemment, le ministère de l'économie et des finances joue un rôle clé, pour ne pas dire fondamental, en fait, dans l'implémentation, dans l'exécution de ces réformes-là. Ceci dit, on a également aussi un plan de développement qui s'étend sur 5 ans, dont le dernier a été adopté en 2021. Donc, c'est à partir de ce plan et de la vision qu'on s'est fixée qu'on détermine en fait tout ce qui est comme réforme. Donc, pour ce qui est en fait et dans ce plan-là, on se rend compte qu'à l'intérieur, on a évidemment tous les 3 grands piliers du compact qui sont en fait pris en compte dans la mise en œuvre de ces réformes-là. Donc, c'est vraiment ce processus-là où on a un plan de long terme à partir duquel nous déterminons en fait les réformes prioritaires. Et à l'intérieur de ces réformes, naturellement, on a tout ce qui est comme réformes liées au compact, dans les domaines du compact que nous exécutons et donc qui font l'objet de suivi. Donc, c'est un peu le processus qu'on a et qui est en fait un processus très huileux, qui marche bien, qui fonctionne bien et qui nous permet en fait d'assurer en fait l'exécution des réformes convenues dans le cadre du compact G20. Bien évidemment, ce que nous faisons, c'est que l'apport important du compact, c'est que le compact a donné en fait plus ou moins un cadre unique où tous les acteurs se retrouvent pour pouvoir en fait s'assurer qu'on a des réformes dans les 3 piliers clés là, qui sont mises en œuvre. Donc ça, nous saluons cela. En plus de ça, l'autre point important que nous voulons souligner, c'est avec en fait l'Allemagne. Avec l'Allemagne, en plus du compact, on va dire général qu'on a conclu avec tous les pays, on a eu en fait un compact bilatéral où on a ciblé des secteurs d'intérêt pour l'Allemagne et nous déterminons en fait les réformes dans ces secteurs-là et que nous mettons en œuvre. Et ça, comme Sylvia l'a rappelé tout à l'heure, ce qui a été très intéressant, c'est en fait les incentives, en fait, les incitations que l'Allemagne a données. Pour la première année, qui est de 2019 à 2020, on a pu mobiliser autour de 100 millions d'euros. C'est-à-dire qu'on avait en fait des réformes. On s'était dit que si on les achève avant la fin de l'année, alors on bénéficie d'un appui budgétaire de l'Allemagne de 100 millions d'euros. Donc ça nous a permis en fait de pouvoir exécuter toutes les réformes qu'on a convenues, qui étaient en fait focus sur le secteur des énergies renouvelables et de la promotion en fait de l'investissement privé. Et lorsqu'on a fini, en 2021, on a réédité encore la même chose avec 45 millions d'euros. Et cette année encore, on a réédité avec 30 millions d'euros. Et cette année encore, on est dans le même process avec des réformes qu'on a convenues qui nous permettent de mobiliser 45 millions d'euros. Donc, en fait, ça, c'est vraiment, ça m'amène au deuxième point pour savoir quelles sont les leçons qu'on a, qu'est-ce qui mérite d'être amélioré et puis quelles sont les leçons apprises. Nous pensons qu'en fait, dans le cas du compact G20, il y a lieu de pouvoir de disposer d'un système qui motive les pays membres du compact à implémenter les réformes. Et parce que définir de façon globale les réformes à mettre en œuvre, c'est intéressant, mais lorsque les pays n'ont pas en face des motivations, on n'a pas en face en fait des incentives qui nous disent que si vous réalisez cette réforme, voilà par exemple les bénéfices concrets que vous mobilisez et que ça reste plus ou moins en fait, oui, on va promouvoir les investissements directs étrangers, mais on ne perçoit pas tout de suite en fait le gain immédiat. Donc, alors que si le gain immédiat est là, écoutez, si vous avez pu être capable d'atteindre tel niveau de réforme, votre pays peut mobiliser tel financement. Alors, nous estimons que ça va un peu accélérer un peu la mise en œuvre de ces réformes-là. Et puis, pour mieux structurer, nous pensons en fait qu'aujourd'hui, il y a lieu surtout de pouvoir s'inspirer peut-être du cas de l'Allemagne où les pays en fait membres du compact auraient ce que j'appelle des compacts bilatéraux avec les autres pays du G20. C'est-à-dire chaque pays du G20 viendrait pour plus ou moins avec je prends le cas de la Côte d'Ivoire. La Côte d'Ivoire conclut avec les États-Unis, par exemple, un compact bilatéral qui va être focalisé sur un secteur donné avec des réformes sur lesquelles l'État de Côte d'Ivoire et l'État américain s'entendraient. Et puis, à la clé, il y a en fait toute une panoplie de financement, d'appui technique qui pourrait être apporté. Et ensuite, les partenaires techniques, notamment le FMI, la Banque mondiale, la Banque africaine, joueraient en fait ce rôle transversal-là, où ils vont en fait coordonner tous ces compacts bilatéraux qui seront mis en œuvre à côté en fait du compact général. Donc, le compact général deviendrait une somme de compacts bilatéraux conclus avec chaque État. Et là, c'est plus focalisé, c'est plus direct et c'est plus précis en termes de gains qu'on pourrait mobiliser et surtout en termes d'incentives à pouvoir en fait implémenter. Et ça permettrait d'adresser des questions précises. En ce moment-là, on ne serait pas on ne serait pas en train de se demander encore, est-ce que oui? Parce que la question aujourd'hui qu'on se pose, est-ce que toutes les réformes que nous avons implémentées là, on l'aurait fait s'il n'y avait pas le compact? Ma réponse est malheureusement oui. Donc, en d'autres termes, ça pose la question de l'impact réel du compact en matière de réforme des pays qui en sont membres. Donc, en allant pays par pays, j'ai envie de dire secteur par secteur pour adresser et regarder au plus près les points d'intérêt, je pense que ça permettra en fait de pouvoir avoir plus d'impact au niveau du compact. Donc, voici un peu quelques points que nous avons voulu soulever. Et puis, enfin, il y a aussi la question des urgences. Aujourd'hui, oui, on est dans l'approche de dire on adresse les réformes dans le cadre du compact, mais le compact aussi doit être cet instrument-là qui permet aujourd'hui aux pays membres, quand on est dans des situations de choc particulier, de pouvoir bénéficier des appuis spécifiques, notamment avec des réformes qui pourraient en fait être identifiées. Je prends le cas de la COVID. La COVID-19 est arrivée, c'était un choc majeur, mais on n'a pas vu en fait comment on adaptait rapidement le compact pour pouvoir adresser justement les urgences liées à la COVID. Aujourd'hui, on a le choc lié à la guerre russo-ukrainienne. La question est de savoir comment aujourd'hui les effets de cette guerre-là, en passant des réformes de compact, comment on les adresse complètement. Donc, enfin, je conclue en disant il y a lieu, par exemple, de mettre en place des fonds spécifiques qui peut être un pool de fonds qui sont alimentés par la Banque mondiale, le FMI, je ne sais pas, ou la Banque africaine, où on dit, écoutez, si on veut adresser les questions liées, les réformes liées pour tous les pays qui sont vraiment des pays qui adressent les réformes liées au changement climatique, alors vous avez la possibilité de bénéficier de ce financement-là. Là, on adresserait en fait une sorte de critères ou de réformes à mettre en œuvre pour y bénéficier. Donc, voici un peu, globalement, en fait, l'expérience que nous voulons partager en fait sur l'exécution du compact. J'espère n'avoir pas été trop long. Voilà, merci beaucoup encore. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur Tano. Vincent, do you have a comment?
No, I just wanted to make sure we could hear you, so we can. Thank you. Please proceed.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's try our colleagues from Burkina Faso. And Mr. Tana, your points are well noted. We'll come back to them again. Monsieur Ouedraogo, do you, and I apologize if I'm butchering your name, please correct me if I am. Can you, we can see you? Yes.
Oui, allô?
Yes, oui.
Ok,
We can hear you now.
donc bonjour à toutes et à tous. Donc, madame, il n'y a pas de souci, moi c'est Ouedraogo Amidou, vous l'avez si bien prononcé, donc il n'y a pas de souci à ce niveau. Au niveau du Burkina Faso, nous voudrons vous dire merci beaucoup pour, en tout cas, l'invitation et l'importance que vous accordez à notre pays. Donc, pour dire que le Burkina Faso a adhéré en tout cas au compact en octobre 2018, et nous tenons à dire merci aux pays et aux institutions qui nous ont accompagnés, parce que pour l'adhésion, il a fallu que nous puissions élaborer une matrice. Et pour l'élaboration de cette matrice, nous avons eu l'appui des institutions telles que la Banque mondiale, la BAD et autres, et également le FMI, également avec les autres pays, l'Allemagne et d'autres. Donc, nous tenons à vous dire merci pour le soutien. Et lorsque nous avons eu le OK de notre adhésion, du coup, nous avons préparé un certain nombre, je dirais, de documents et de projets, parce que, comme je dirais, la cible était le secteur privé. Nous avons été informés qu'il fallait préparer un certain nombre de projets qui pourront intéresser le secteur privé, que ce soit le secteur privé allemand ou d'autres secteurs privés au niveau européen. Et nous avons donc constitué une liste que nous avons envoyée à travers notre ambassade pour qu'on puisse faire en tout cas la promotion de ces projets porteurs, de ces projets importants là auprès du secteur privé. Sauf que jusqu'au jour aujourd'hui, nous n'avons pas en tout cas une visibilité, en tout cas sur, je dirais, l'adhésion des partenaires à ces projets que nous avons soumis. Donc, pour nous, c'est vrai, nous avons adhéré, mais nous n'avons pas trop de visibilité sur les acquis que le Burkina engrange au niveau du Compact. C'est vrai, chaque année, nous nous retrouvons parce que après l'adhésion, il y a un comité interministériel qui a été mis en place, qui regroupe plusieurs ministères qui sont, je dirais, porteurs des réformes. Donc, ça veut dire chaque année, nous nous retrouvons, nous faisons un rapport sur la mise en œuvre des réformes. Et je dirais même que la semaine prochaine, nous allons nous retrouver pour faire en tout cas le bilan de ce rapport pour l'année 2022. Mais le souci est que, c'est vrai, lorsqu'on élabore notre rapport, on le soumet à travers la Banque mondiale qui l'achemine à qui des droits. Mais après ça, pour nous, il y a des acteurs, ou bien pour nous, ceux qui pilotent le compact pouvaient nous accompagner en disant que vous pouvez adresser les projets qui peuvent en tout cas toucher les privés qui sont intéressés. Mais pour nous, bon, nous avons le rapport, mais nous n'avons pas de visibilité. Nous ne savons pas qui il faut adresser, qui il faut contacter pour voir comment nous, on peut bénéficier d'un certain nombre de choses. Voilà. Parce que, bon, les réformes que nous menons, ce sont des réformes qui rentrent en ligne de compte dans notre plan national de développement économique et social. Lorsque nous, on adhérait au compact, c'était le plan 2016-2020. Mais après ça, il y a un nouveau plan qui a été validé l'année dernière, le plan 2021-2025. Donc, ça veut dire que nous suivons les réformes qui sont là-bas. Il y a des réformes, je dirais, macroéconomiques. Et là-bas, bon, nous regardons tout ce qui est question macro. Et également,
Sorry, Mr. Madraka, we are losing you. And you have 1 minute, please. Can you hear us?
Je dirais, réforme au niveau du Fonds monétaire intérieur public-privé pour pouvoir attirer en tout cas les acteurs privés au niveau du Burkina Faso. Mais en tout cas, je partage l'avis de mon prédécesseur. Il faut que chaque pays puisse voir en tout cas ses intérêts dans ce combat. Il faut qu'on sache que lorsqu'on fait des efforts en matière de réforme, lorsqu'on fait le bilan de la mise en œuvre des réformes et qu'on envoie, il faut qu'au moins vous puissiez nous dire, bon, voilà les efforts que vous avez faits, voilà ce que vous méritez, ou même pour vos projets, voilà les partenaires que vous devrez vous adresser pour avoir en tout cas un retour. Mais concernant le Burkina Faso, voilà. Donc, il faut avoir en tout cas un système de motivation pour pouvoir galvaniser. Sinon, nous, bon, par exemple, de 2018 à 2022, si on nous dit de faire en tout cas un bilan sur, en tout cas, ce que nous avons eu dans le compact, bon, je dirais que le bilan sera mitigé parce que, bon, on mène des réformes, mais il n'y a pas de, je dirais, de système de motivation, il n'y a pas de plus-value en tout cas. Parce que les réformes que nous menons, ce sont des réformes d'ordre général qui rentrent en tout cas dans notre plan national de développement économique. C'est pas, bon, je pense que je n'ai pas monopolisé la parole. Je pense que c'est l'essentiel que j'avais à dire en tout cas concernant le Burkina Faso. Merci.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rodrigo. And I think the same sentiment here is what additional value add. And I would be happy if the following speakers could also share with us on the third point, which is how can we make it more value added specifically, in addition to whether it's investment, technical expertise, so on and so forth. So if you have any specifics on that, please go ahead. Next, I would like to invite our colleagues from Egypt. So I'm not sure if it's Mr. Kuchuk or Allah. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. This is Mustafa Qutbi, a senior economist from the Macro Fiscal Policy Unit. Unfortunately, Mr. Ahmed Kujuk has other commitments that he had to attend. So today I'll be attending with my colleague Ale. Let me brief you on our reform delivery process and what we have been doing over the past couple of years. First, we totally agree that growth should be led by the private sector. But the Egyptian economy, as you might know, had been hit hard several times during the past 11 years. So for the private sector to adopt reforms, there were prerequisites for such. To begin, and as Sylvia previously said, the political will is key for delivering reforms. Then the government worked in a collaborative approach to deliver the required reforms that should enable the private sector adopt these reforms later on to ensure its sustainability. So speaking from our perspective, the Ministry of Finance has clearly identified three main reform targets. These are maintaining the fiscal consolidation and debt sustainability, improving the efficacy of spending, and contributing to the overall economic development. For example, maintaining the fiscal consolidation and debt sustainability. For this target, we had like four belonging goals. These are decreasing the debt as a percent of GDP and decreasing the gross financing needs, increasing tax revenues through digitalization and administrative reforms, and some other structural reforms like the indexation mechanism for the fossil fuel products to reflect the changes in both crude oil prices and exchange rate fluctuations in order to protect our budget from turbulences that might affect it. Also, we have worked on amending the competition law to include more controls on mergers and acquisitions. In addition, we have worked on the industrial land allocation mechanism to allow for more competition and ensure an adequate output from the industrialization process. And also we have been working on the state-owned enterprises reforms and financial position reporting of them to allow for more transparency and accountability. With this in mind, the status quo of our current economic and developmental vision got more integrated in the government's work. For instance, sustainability, climate change, green recovery, and private sector empowerment are becoming permanent issues and therefore becoming on the top of our priorities list. For this, we have revisited the institutional setup at MOF to streamline climate change, green recovery into our operations, including through developing a new organization structure to include appointing a permanent secretary and also introduce the policy as well as the strategy functions. We are also doing our best to make the best use of the upcoming COP27 to get our goals regarding climate change materialize. We have also done a lot of efforts to get the newly unified public financial management law passed by the parliament. This law actually introduces the modern trends of the public financial management. The newly addressed reforms also entail moving from administrative to functional classification for the budget. We have also worked on setting a medium-term strategy for the Ministry of Finance with hard targets and KPIs to be measurable and to measure this discipline and performance. Lastly, we have been working also on setting medium-term strategies for both revenues and debt management. There is still a room for improvement, which could only be done by addressing our main persistent and ongoing challenges. These are, despite the digitalization efforts, informality and tax evasion still persist. For this, we need to go beyond analytical perspective toward an action plan to address the persistent gaps in realistic technique. Also, the current geopolitical tensions that created a more profound sense of insecurity and uncertainty in the international and domestic financial markets have derailed the focus of the government in delivering much needed private sector reforms. For example, much focus was directed toward maintaining food security, allocating more resources to support most vulnerable segments of the population, and securing food and energy sources. Finally, no one could disagree that during these difficult times, unveiling necessary financing to help compact countries in moving forward with the reform plans is key. Also, continuing with peer learning seminars and dialogues is also key for giving compact countries the opportunities to explore and share their own experiences and views. And finally, Africa as a continent needs a more integrated approach in terms of policy alignment and applying the needed reforms to mobilize the resources necessary for reforms and private sector engagement. And this could be done only through establishing a platform for countries to engage directly with each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very important points there. Very much appreciated. Okay, because of time, I'm going to move a little bit quicker now, just so that we can allow everyone to speak. The next on the agenda is our colleagues from Ethiopia. So, Mr. Oops, sorry. Apologies. Okay, there you go. We can see your screen. Great.
Okay, so can you hear me? Good afternoon all.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So this is Mobraton from Ethiopian Investment Commission. I will go quick on the presentation that we have. So nationally, Ethiopia has been undertaking different and multi-range of reform activities, which are very much aligned with the current reform agendas of CWA. On macroeconomic framework, for instance, we have the macroeconomic stability intervention areas, domestic revenue enhancement and mobilization activities, and strengthening public investment management as well. From this perspective, we've been focusing on managing the inflation rates, on stabilizing different external debt management, on employing different debt management activities and related policy frameworks to that end. And on the domestic revenue mobilization, we have been undertaking different activities, including tax compliance intervention areas. When it comes to business framework, we've been undertaking reforms on regulatory areas and also institutional structural reforms. Followingly, we have been also following different activities which focus on investor protection and dispute resolutions. And on the third point, with regard to financing framework, also different investment risk mitigation activities have been undergoing and still are being followed both by the Ministry of Finance, by the National Bank of Ethiopia, and concerned stakeholders as well. So with this regard, our key reforms have been divided mainly in three main areas: macroeconomic reforms, structural reforms, and sectoral reforms, which aimed at correcting the foreign currency imbalances, controlling the inflation, improving access to finance, ensuring debt sustainability, and also easing the doing business, and as well as addressing different sector-specific institutional and market failures. And these are expected to bring an outcomes of building confidence both in the overall in the business area and on the investment, especially on the foreign direct investment attraction as well. And then on the second outcome, we have the rebalance of growth and enhancement of productivity, which at the end is expected to impact or to bring all-inclusive growth, poverty reduction, and creating a path to prosperity. So with regard to this, we have the lessons here, and also some of few challenges actually. On the lessons and the challenges we have, for instance, we learned that stakeholders collaboration shall be always at the center of delivering the activities. This may include co-owning and co-delivering different activities. And we also have seen that consistent follow-up and communication is key especially having a team or account managers on few intervention areas plays a significant role in delivering the different reform activities. And then we also learned that the importance of monitoring and evaluation, especially regularly, each key performance indicator has to be followed and also measured. Having these smart performance indicators plays a significant role in tracking and in delivering the different reform activities, which we have seen in the first slide. And then at last, we have what kind of assistance do we need, either from the CWA support program or from other development partners. So for instance, speaking from Ethiopian Investment Commission or from Ethiopian side, we are working hard to be among the top foreign direct investment destinations, and also to become one of the good doing business rankings in the World Bank, and in all the performance indicators, including starting business, dealing with construction permits, getting credit, paying taxes, trading across borders, registering property, getting electricity or other infrastructures, protecting minority investors, resolving insolvency, and enforcing contracts. In all these issues and cross-cutting reforms, we are taking different intervention areas, which may include digitizing the service delivery, for instance, from customs view, from paying taxes, from issuing investment licenses or other permits. We are highly employing digital services at this time. And from these, we need huge assistance from the program as well. And the specifics may include, for instance, there are different which are ongoing reforms, and following these reforms, including allocation of resources is one. The other thing is initiating new intervention areas in line to latest developments. For instance, we've changed our investment law to allow more participation and more inflow of foreign direct investment, and we may need assistance on that as well. And then we have also structural reform assistances that we foresee to receive from the CWA or from the development partners. This is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated, Mebratom. Next, we have on our list Ghana. So, Mr. Note, are you here, Mr. Note? Please go ahead and unmute. Oh. Please try now. Hello, Mr. Note? Can you hear us? Please give us a sign if you can hear us. If not, we will go to Guinea and come back to you. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. So, Mr. Konde from Guinea, are you here, please? Please go ahead and speak. Unmute yourself. Okay. There we go.
Allô?
Yes, hello, we can hear you.
Vous m'entendez?
Oui, nous entendons.
Bonjour, bonjour. Moi, c'est Condé Ibrahima Khalil de la Guinée. Et pour ne pas plus tarder, je vais décrire un peu la situation du pays dans le cadre du CWA. Et je crois beaucoup a déjà été dit par mes collègues de la Côte d'Ivoire et du Burkina Faso, parce que comme ces deux pays, la Guinée aussi a entamé des réformes depuis 2010 à travers un plan national de développement économique et social, et qui est en train d'être mis en œuvre actuellement. Et à travers ce plan national de développement économique et social, les réformes qui dans la matrice, dans le compte du CWA, rentrent dans ce cadre-là aussi. Donc, c'est ce qui fait que nous n'avons pas beaucoup de problèmes dans le cadre dans la mise en œuvre de ces réformes-là. Mais le problème se situe où on a un petit problème au niveau de la visibilité du CWA ou du positionnement même du CWA dans tout le processus. Parce que c'est vrai que ces réformes-là sont en train d'être faites, mais nous avons peu de réponses au niveau du CWA. C'est vrai qu'on est aussi appuyé par les partenaires techniques et financiers, notamment la Banque mondiale, l'SFI, le Fonds monétaire international, qui nous aident aussi à faire le suivi de ces différentes réformes-là qui se trouvent dans la matrix. Mais au-delà de ça, nous n'arrivons pas à avoir des échanges ou bien des rencontres périodiques avec tout le groupe du CWA pour nous permettre aussi de connaître où nous en sommes et où nous voulons aller. C'est ce qui peut nous permettre aussi d'avoir une visibilité et de mieux s'orienter et se projeter dans le futur en termes de prochaines réformes que nous devrions mettre en œuvre. Et surtout aussi, on remarque aussi que le secteur privé, surtout en Guinée ici, n'est pas très impliqué dans le processus du CWA. Et toutes ces réformes-là qui sont en train d'être mises en œuvre, c'est pour le secteur privé, au fait, parce que c'est eux qui créent de l'emploi. Et c'est dans ce sens-là que nous voulons évoluer. Mais il faut que le CWA soit peut-être, comme le disait mon collègue Tano de la Côte d'Ivoire, soit le pont entre les pays et les différents partenaires, soit bilatéraux ou multilatéraux. Et ce qui va nous permettre aussi d'être beaucoup.
Hello, Mr. Conde? I think he's still there. Please, can you hear us? Okay.
Hello.
Okay, Mr. Note. Yes, we can hear you. Okay, we'll pause for Mr. Conde. Please go ahead with Ghana. Hello, Mr. Note. We can hear you. Did we lose you again? I think we're having some technical difficulties today, as we are all very aware. Okay, Mr. Note, please do send me a chat when you get back. Similarly, hopefully Mr. Conde will be back with us shortly. We can't avoid these technical difficulties. Okay, so let's move on to our colleagues from Morocco. Mr. Abdelali Edebay. I apologize again if I'm messing up your name. Please unmute yourself and give your presentation. Over to you.
Merci beaucoup, Freda. Bon, j'arrive pas à activer, je ne sais pas pourquoi mon caméra, mais c'est pas de problème. Donc, alors, tout d'abord, je voudrais remercier vivement ACET pour ses multiples activités de promotion d'initiatives Compact with Africa. Et à travers elles, tous les partenaires qui contribuent à l'organisation de ces ateliers d'apprentissage entre pairs et pour les revues et évaluations des progrès de mise en œuvre de notre initiative. Je salue également à cette occasion la mise à disposition de la traduction simultanée en français. Je crois certainement que ça devrait améliorer les bénéfices attendus des échanges entre nos pays. Et on vous encouragerait à de la maintenir lors de nos prochaines rencontres. Je salue également le choix de la thématique pertinent. Donc, en l'occurrence, celle d'aujourd'hui sur les enseignements tirés de la mise en œuvre des réformes. À cet égard, permettez-moi de partager avec vous quelques aspects de l'expérience marocaine en matière de mise en œuvre des réformes. Le Maroc est engagé dans un rythme continu de réformes structurelles et sectorielles qui s'est accéléré durant les 2 dernières décennies, conduisant à un renforcement du rôle du secteur privé. Sur le plan macroéconomique, en particulier, notre pays a réussi à gérer la crise sans précédent du Covid-19 en prenant des mesures proactives de soutien pour atténuer les effets de la crise et soutenir l'économie dans le cadre d'un plan de relance sans mettre en péril la stabilité macroéconomique et la soutenabilité des finances publiques. En ce qui concerne la mobilisation des ressources, donc une nouvelle loi cadre sur la réforme fiscale a été adoptée. Et ça, c'est une démarche. Peut-être il y a pas mal de lois cadres qui ont été instituées, je reviendrai peut-être, et qui permettent un petit peu d'ancrer de grands chantiers de réforme et de solliciter donc toute l'adhésion un petit peu et la volonté politique pour la mise en œuvre des réformes. Donc la loi cadre sur la réforme fiscale, elle vise à établir un système fiscal efficace, juste et équitable afin de mobiliser le potentiel fiscal à même de financer les politiques publiques et promouvoir le développement économique et l'inclusion et la cohésion sociale. Cette loi cadre est le fruit de larges concertations dans le cadre des assises fiscales tenues en 2019 et elle a permis de tracer la voie et donner une meilleure visibilité aux opérateurs sur la mise en œuvre de la réforme sur les 5 prochaines années. Un autre volet, nous convenons tous ensemble que les besoins en termes d'infrastructures et de services sociaux sont de plus en plus importants au moment où les espaces budgétaires se resserrent, notamment dans les pays africains. À cet égard, les partenariats publics-privés constituent un levier important pour promouvoir l'investissement privé, tout en renforçant l'offre en termes d'infrastructures, en améliorant la qualité des services publics et en dégageant des marges de manœuvre au niveau des finances publiques. Je ne reviendrai pas sur l'expérience marocaine qui a été et l'évolution du cadre macroéconomique, réglementaire, institutionnel, les mesures d'accompagnement en matière de renforcement des capacités, d'amélioration de la gouvernance qui ont été développées lors de notre dernier atelier. Également, une nouvelle loi cadre relative à la réforme du secteur des entreprises publiques a été mise en place pour stimuler une nouvelle dynamique dans le secteur public en vue d'accroître sa performance et améliorer sa gouvernance. L'ensemble, je dirais que les réformes sur le plan macroéconomique, la concrétisation et la mise en œuvre de ces réformes est assurée notamment par le ministère de l'Économie et des Finances, mais bien évidemment en concertation avec les autres partenaires nationaux, publics et privés concernés, ainsi qu'avec l'appui et l'accompagnement appréciable de nos bailleurs de fonds. Au niveau de l'environnement des affaires, le Maroc affiche de bonnes performances et a amélioré significativement son classement Doing Business, si on le donne, même si ce n'est plus d'actualité peut-être, et en passant du 130e rang en 2009 au 68e rang en 2017 et puis au 53e rang en 2020. Et ce grâce aux réformes importantes mises en œuvre dans ce domaine. Je citerai notamment la profonde réforme des centres régionaux d'investissement, la facilitation et la digitalisation des procédures administratives, la modernisation du cadre juridique des affaires et le renforcement de la bonne gouvernance et de la transparence du monde des affaires. Alors, pour assurer le suivi et la concrétisation de ces réformes, j'aimerais souligner que le Maroc a notamment mis en place dès 2009 un comité national de l'environnement des affaires qui est présidé par le chef du gouvernement et qui a pour mission de renforcer la coordination interministérielle et le dialogue public-privé et d'instaurer un pilotage stratégique des réformes. Il fonctionne suivant un plan d'action annuel préparé selon un processus rigoureux et validé dans le cadre d'une réunion présidée par le chef du gouvernement. À cette réunion prennent part tous les membres du comité en leur qualité de ministres pour les départements ministériels ou des présidents pour les autres organes publics et privés. Dans ce cadre, une nouvelle politique nationale d'amélioration de l'environnement des affaires pour la période 2021-2025 a été mise en place. Cette politique met l'accent sur l'amélioration de l'environnement des affaires en menant des réformes susceptibles de créer des conditions plus favorables à l'entrepreneuriat et à l'investissement et à lever les contraintes auxquelles sont confrontés les acteurs du marché. En ce qui concerne le système financier, je voudrais mentionner ici en particulier la mise en place de la stratégie nationale d'inclusion financière en 2019 à l'initiative conjointe du ministère de l'économie et des finances et de la Banque centrale dans le cadre d'une approche participative. Les réformes se sont concentrées sur l'amélioration de l'accès au financement des PME et des entreprises innovantes, tout en continuant à approfondir le marché des capitaux. Des instruments de financement spécifiques pour les startups et les micro, petites et moyennes entreprises ont été introduits. Le système de microcrédit a également été mis à jour et le cadre juridique régissant la constitution de sûreté mobilière a été modernisé. L'objectif étant de faire de l'inclusion financière un réel vecteur de développement socio-économique, en particulier chez les jeunes, les femmes, les populations en milieu rural et les très petites entreprises. La stratégie d'inclusion financière a défini 5 orientations stratégiques et dont l'une d'elles est consacrée à la pérennisation du pilotage de l'inclusion financière dans la durée, en mettant en place un dispositif de monitoring, de suivi et de coordination dédié. Elle est bâtie sur une gouvernance structurée, je dirais, en 3 étages. Il y a le Conseil national d'inclusion financière, présidé par la ministre de l'économie et des finances et composé des représentants donc de la Banque centrale, des départements ministériels, d'autorités et d'associations professionnelles actives dans la stratégie. Il se réunit au moins une fois par an pour valider la vision et les orientations stratégiques de la stratégie. Il y a le comité stratégique, présidé par le gouverneur de la Banque centrale, est composé des représentants du ministère de l'économie et des finances et des sponsors des différents chantiers de l'inclusion financière. Il a pour mission le pilotage et la mise en œuvre de la stratégie et il se réunit au moins 3 fois par an. Et puis, il y a le comité de pilotage et de coordination composé donc du ministère de l'économie et des finances et de la Banque centrale et qui a pour mission la coordination des travaux des groupes de travail. Donc, toutes les réformes évoquées ci-dessus ont permis au Maroc d'impulser une importante dynamique d'investissement privé, de constituer une destination privilégiée pour les investissements directs étrangers et de renforcer la confiance des investisseurs et des partenaires dans l'économie nationale et dans la résilience des fondamentaux macroéconomiques. Alors, pour conclure, il convient de souligner qu'en dépit des progrès accomplis, notre économie demeure confrontée à des défis majeurs, incluant la réalisation d'une croissance en deçà d'une croissance et en deçà du potentiel, qui n'est pas à même donc de résorber le chômage, et la transformation structurelle demeure également en deçà du potentiel. À ce niveau, peut-être c'est bien de rappeler que la crise économique inattendue provoquée par le contexte de la pandémie de Covid-19 et qui a été accentuée par la crise ukrainienne a montré l'importance et la nécessité de disposer d'un secteur privé suffisamment solide, résilient et compétitif, capable de réagir rapidement et de transformer les défis en véritables opportunités. Force est de constater que cette crise a relevé de nouveaux défis liés à la sécurité sanitaire, à la protection sociale et au développement du capital humain, ainsi que les questions liées à l'adaptation au changement climatique. La phase post-crise pourrait, de notre point de vue, constituer une réelle opportunité pour repenser nos programmes de réforme dans le sens de bâtir un modèle économique et sociétal plus résilient. Néanmoins, les enjeux et la complexité de la situation actuelle, concomitamment à des marges de manœuvre relativement limitées, rendent le choix des priorités de plus en plus difficile. La coopération régionale et internationale est certes qui a été mise en lumière depuis l'avènement de cette crise, s'avère indispensable pour appuyer les politiques nationales mises en place. Dans ce cadre, l'appui de nos partenaires bilatéraux et multilatéraux est particulièrement appréciable, aussi bien en termes de mobilisation de financement qu'en termes d'assistance technique, pour accompagner la mise en œuvre des stratégies sectorielles et des programmes de réforme nationaux. Donc, la promotion d'investissements privés appuyée par l'initiative Compact with Africa, elle est certainement, donc elle fait partie de cette coopération régionale et internationale. Oui, et juste pour donc 2 mots, et je terminerai, s'il vous plaît, Freda. Donc, à ce niveau-là, une des spécificités qu'on apprécie particulièrement avec nos bailleurs de fonds, ça a été dans le cadre donc, de nos programmes, comme ça a été dit tout à l'heure par nos collègues en Côte d'Ivoire avec les Allemands, et c'est également le cas avec la Banque mondiale, avec d'autres bailleurs de fonds, donc plusieurs bailleurs de fonds, c'est que lorsqu'on a le financement, on a également cette possibilité de mobiliser un appui technique financier qui aide à la mise en œuvre des réformes et qui permet de réussir mieux les réformes. Et je crois que je terminerai à ce niveau-là tout en saluant bien sûr l'appui de nos bailleurs de fonds et pour un petit peu relever les différents défis auxquels nous faisons face. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that contribution. Again, a lot in terms of technical expertise and investment. All right, so let's go to Ghana again. I know, Mr. Note, you are having some technical difficulties. Would you like to try one more time?
Thank you very much, Frida. And indeed, I was having some difficulties today. The network has not been favorable to me at all.
Did it rain?
I think it's a little bit better. So let me be fast before it goes off again. I think the Compact with Africa initiative has been very helpful. As a result of we being part, various reforms have actually been carried out that will actually improve the business environment, as well as also the issue of financing, especially. Various legislations have been passed, as you are all aware, in terms of the Companies Act. We have the Solvency Bill. We have bills for the state interest and the government authority to actually take a comprehensive look at the state-owned enterprises, how to make them more effective and efficient in the delivery of public service. And so, in a nutshell, in that angle, we've been able to achieve some strides. That notwithstanding, I must say that what has actually worked more are the tangibles that we are seeing with the bilateral components that we have with the Germans, that we call Reform and Investment Partnership. This partnership came with a form of arrangement or an agreement between the parties with special focus on renewable energy and energy efficiency, as well as the financial sector. And so as a result of this, the Germans were able to support the establishment of the Development Bank Ghana, which is actually going to provide financial services or finance, affordable finance to SMEs to enable them become more effective and also
Well, Mr. Nante. I think we lost him again. Yeah, indeed, technical difficulties today. Okay, our colleagues from Benin are also back now. Monsieur Sina, are you there, please?
Merci. Merci, Freda. Merci également à Vincent pour l'opportunité que vous nous offrez de discuter aujourd'hui autour des réformes du Compact with Africa, du processus fait par nos différents États. Il faut dire que au niveau du Bénin, nous avons également rejoint le processus depuis 2018 et avons essayé chaque fois d'aligner un peu les réformes du Compact with Africa sur les politiques publiques nationales, ce qui nous a permis d'implémenter également plusieurs réformes, mais des réformes qui sont entreprises par le gouvernement en matière de gestion de la dette publique, couplée à l'amélioration de la gouvernance et de l'état de droit. Par exemple, au Bénin, nous avons revu et mis en place une stratégie efficiente de gestion de la dette publique qui a permis, comme vous l'avez suivi ces dernières années, au Bénin d'anticiper même sur des échéances de paiement de la dette, une réforme de gestion budgétaire désormais axée sur le mode programme, et également un vaste programme de dématérialisation du service public qui nous a permis de dématérialiser 200 services publics, passant par les régies, notamment tout le processus de déclaration de paiement des impôts, tout le processus de déclaration de paiement de la douane, au niveau de l'agence foncière, le processus d'acquisition d'une parcelle, tout est dématérialisé, et également au niveau des registres d'accès au crédit également. Ces réformes ont permis au Bénin de réussir, par exemple en juillet dernier, sa première émission d'obligations internationales dédiée au financement de projets à fort impact sur l'atteinte des ODD des Nations Unies. Une première pour un État africain, cette opération a permis de mobiliser un montant de près de 500 millions d'euros. Nous avons également conclu avec le FMI fin avril 2022 un nouvel accord de 700 millions de dollars en termes de facilité élargie de crédit qui vise à répondre à des besoins urgents de financement liés notamment aux défis sécuritaires, aux séquelles de la COVID-19 et de la guerre en Ukraine pour soutenir le plan national de développement. Nous avons pu réussir ces mobilisations à cause des réformes entreprises et qui sont également inscrites au niveau de notre matrice Compact with Africa. Vous savez, vous n'allez pas sur les marchés financiers quand vous ne répondez pas à un certain nombre de conditionnalités. Toujours parlant de notre matrice Compact with Africa, nous y avons inscrit un programme phare qui vise à réorienter la politique nationale de l'éducation, notamment vers un type d'enseignement de formation technique et professionnelle. Et nous sommes appuyés en cela par la revue fédérale d'Allemagne, la France et également la revue fédérale de la Suisse qui nous permet de travailler depuis l'année dernière sur la construction de 30 lycées techniques agricoles modernes avec de nouvelles vocations qui amèneront à contribuer efficacement au développement de l'économie nationale, notamment une économie durable. Également la construction de 7 écoles de référence dans les domaines de l'énergie, du numérique, du bâtiment, des travaux publics, de l'automobile, des équipements industriels, de l'eau et de l'assainissement. La vision de l'État, c'est de passer progressivement de l'enseignement général systématique à un enseignement technique, à une formation professionnelle qui permet d'avoir une école qui sort un capital humain immédiatement disponible conforme aux besoins de développement du pays. Le troisième pôle dont j'aimerais parler, ce sont les efforts que le gouvernement du Bénin est en train de mettre en place pour la promotion d'une zone économique spéciale, notamment la zone économique de Glodjigwe, dont la promotion est confiée au groupe Arise, qui est présent dans plusieurs pays de la sous-région. Mais la bonne nouvelle, c'est que le Bénin a déjà conclu des accords pour la mise en place de 6 unités industrielles de transformation de fibres coton d'une capacité totale de 100 000 tonnes. Vous savez, le Bénin est très orienté dans la production du coton. Nous avons été dernièrement premier producteur du coton en Afrique. Le Bénin a également conclu un accord pour la mise en place de 29 unités industrielles de confection de vêtements et de 14 unités industrielles de transformation de noix de cajou d'une capacité totale de 150 000 tonnes. Ce sont des actions, des programmes inscrits dans notre matrice Compact River Africa. Pour aller rapidement, quelles sont les leçons que nous avons apprises de ce processus? Nous avons une matrice qui dénomme près d'une centaine de réformes. Nous nous apercevons de la nécessité de la mise en place d'une unité de monitoring et de réforme de l'œuvre, ce que nous appelons ici une cellule climat des affaires, c'est-à-dire une cellule qui tient et anime nos matrices de réforme pour véritablement en faire un suivi efficace, mais également en faire un monitoring. Cette cellule a été créée au Bénin, le cadre institutionnel existe déjà. Le ministre des Finances l'a créé, lui a confié la mission d'étudier, d'analyser, de suivre, d'évaluer, de faire des propositions et prendre des initiatives se rapportant à l'amélioration du climat des affaires au Bénin. Les services que pourront offrir cette cellule, c'est l'élaboration, le suivi et le monitoring des matrices de réforme, notamment celles en lien avec le climat des affaires, la vulgarisation et la communication sur les réformes relatives au climat des affaires, le pilotage du dialogue public-privé, et également l'accompagnement des entreprises pour mobiliser les financements dont elles peuvent bénéficier et faciliter l'accès et l'intégration des PME au marché. Nous pensons au regard des expériences que nous avons vécues avec le Compact Africa, notamment au niveau de nos réformes, qu'il est nécessaire, au regard également de ce que nous apprenons au niveau des autres pays, qu'il est nécessaire d'avoir une telle unité pour améliorer le suivi et améliorer le monitoring de nos réformes. Maintenant, quelles sont les contributions que nous attendons du Compact River Africa, du G20 globalement? Il faut dire que le Bénin est partie prenante pour la mise en place d'un fonds fiduciaire pour accompagner la mise en œuvre des réformes contenues dans la matrice Compact River Africa. Grâce à la Banque mondiale, notamment Vincent Freda également était dans la discussion. Nous avons discuté récemment avec nos homologues tunisiens qui nous ont parlé du modèle tunisien de mobilisation de ressources pour financer leur réforme, qui est un modèle qui a véritablement marché. Et je suis convaincu que tous les pays membres du Compact River Africa, notamment les pays du Sud, sont fortement demandeurs de la mise en place de ce fonds fiduciaire pour pouvoir financer directement la mise en œuvre des réformes. Sinon, la volonté politique, nos États l'ont, mais mettre en œuvre toutes les réformes à la fois dans un agenda bien précis pose souvent problème à cause des difficultés de financement. Pour ce qui est du cas typique du Bénin, le Bénin souhaite bien être accompagné dans l'opérationnalisation de sa cellule climat des affaires, notamment un appui en recrutement RH afin d'avoir des spécialistes bien outillés en termes de monitoring, notamment des data scientists, et également des spécialistes en matière de suivi du secteur privé. Nous en avons déjà discuté avec la Banque mondiale et la BAD. La Banque mondiale est open et preneur à nous accompagner. Ce serait bien que le secrétariat du Compact également nous accompagne en ce sens. Et pour finir, le Bénin envisage, courant le mois de septembre prochain, organiser un Compact Event qui sera un dialogue avec le secteur privé afin de mobiliser le secteur privé autour du Compact Africa, notamment montrer au secteur privé béninois le rôle du Compact Africa dans la dynamique du secteur privé, dans la compétitivité d'une économie nationale. Nous serons heureux que le Compact puisse dépêcher à Cotonou un expert pour véritablement entretenir le secteur privé béninois sur le rôle et l'importance du Compact River Africa pour le secteur privé. On avait déjà parlé en off avec Vincent. C'est le moment d'en parler publiquement au niveau de l'ACET afin d'obtenir les contributions de chacun et de tous. Je suis également preneur des initiatives que nos homologues de la Côte d'Ivoire, de la Guinée et du Burkina ont également évoquées. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sina, much appreciated. I'm glad to hear that there's an event coming up, and I'm sure our Vincent, our colleagues will respond with the appropriate representative to send. And hopefully, actually, we hope to be planning an in-person event in Q3. And so hopefully that will allow all of us to get together as well. So more details on that coming. Mr. Norte is back, so let me just give him 2 more minutes, and then I will come to our colleagues in Rwanda, to Delphine. Mr. Norte, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you. Thank you very much. Yes, so I was making a point that the bilateral arrangement we have with Germany, known as the Reform and Investment Partnership.
Hello, Mr. Norte. We lost you again. Today is just not your day. My Ghanaian colleagues, is it raining over there? This is always what happens when it rains. Okay, Mr. Norte. All right. It's unfortunate for us. It looks like today is just not your day. But we look forward to your comments later on. So let's go to our colleagues in Rwanda. Delphine, it's a pleasure to have you here. Please go ahead and unmute yourself, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Frida. I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Delphine Oase, and I'm a strategy analyst in the Rwanda Development Board. And I wonder if there's a way you can allow me to share my screen. We had a very quick 3-slide presentation that we wanted to share with everyone.
Please try now.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
We can see your screen.
Okay. Thank you. So in response to question 1, we wanted to basically discuss what Rwanda's reform delivery process looks like and what has been going on for the past close to 13 years. And basically where the process that has been established, which is one of the reasons why, which has worked well and is the reason why we have been able to successfully implement various reforms and improve the business environment in Rwanda, is that it starts from identifying reforms, and these reforms can either come from past performance in the doing business or the global competitiveness index, or there could be reforms that allow us to align with the national priorities, such as those in the National Strategy for Transformation 1 and the Vision 2050, or just homegrown solutions from the government's need to upgrade outdated laws or legal structures, or from new innovations or new initiatives that challenge existing legal structures and existing and laws. And then once those challenges have been identified, next stage is to propose reforms and the key actions. And then now there's a team is put together, a technical team is put together of from different implementing institutions. So for example, for the doing business reforms, we had a technical team led by the Rwanda Development Board, and it included institutions that represented the 10 indicators that the World Bank, that formed the World Bank report. For example, Ministry of Justice or the Rwanda Revenue Authority, our National Bank, our electricity regulator, and etc. And then the technical team led by RDB, we come together and develop an action plan. And this is done annually. It's done by various stakeholder consultation amongst the technical team, and we put together this action plan. And then it is reviewed by now a steering committee. The steering committee is chaired by our Ministry of Commerce and Trade and Industry, and also made up of the implementing institutions from the tech team, but also other relevant institutions such as our Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning and our Private Sector Federation. And once this review, basically it's back and forth where they're giving their different inputs, and we're going back as a technical team and implementing and putting in place those different inputs. Then once it is approved by the steering committee, is approved by the national cabinet, and then now each institution, each implementing institution now moves on to the stage of implementing those reforms, either like on a national level, depending on the kinds of reforms that there are, or on an institutional level. And then now there is monitoring and evaluation process thereafter, which is led by the coordination team and the steering committee. In the sense, in the case of business reforms and doing business, or any private sector reforms, that's led by the Rwanda Development Board. And basically, the reform process for Rwanda, there have been in three major parts. There are legal reforms, institutional administrative reforms, and digitization and automation of services. That has been a very big priority of the country, to digitize and automate a lot of public services. And as a result, very many things have been achieved through our 10 years of reform journey. One of them being the ease of registering a business in Rwanda. It went from being $400 and taking a couple of days, and now it's free of charge and takes a maximum of 6 hours. Also, the digitization of very many different services, such as filing and payment of taxes. It's all done online. The different government services offered on our platform, which is like applying for your passport, applying for certificates, and different permits and licenses. Also, there's a lot of reforms in our banking laws, which have enabled Rwanda to have an open banking system, and also has resulted in a very quick process to open a bank account in Rwanda. It takes only about 1.5 to 2 hours. And other many different reforms that have been done, such as the digitization of the land registration system, and soon one of the reforms that we're currently implementing is to go paperless, to establish a paperless land registration system. So all these reforms have really positively impacted Rwanda, and now Rwanda in 2020 we ranked second in ease of doing business in Africa. And also and first in the most transparent country in Africa. So this process itself is something that has worked really well in delivering reforms.
Sorry,
and also
1 minute, please.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Then moving on to question 2, what can be better? What can be improved? Basically, what can be improved is to just continue to have momentum as a country, to this momentum to improve and implement reforms, regardless of any circumstance that happen, like the discontinuation of doing business report. Also, efficient resource management, big one being better mechanism for resource mobilization to enable us to continue implementing bold and aggressive reforms. And then the last one, it's putting in place mechanism to better be aware and keep up global trends, which will then enable us to better respond to any shocks. Lastly, on how we better work, can be better structured, how Compact with Africa can be better structured to add value. One is aligning with institutions in the planning, implementation, and M&E phases. And this alignment will enable better collaboration and better collaboration between Compact and different institutions in Rwanda. And lastly, as has been echoed by different colleagues, different countries, is financial support in terms of resource mobilization, but also advisory and technical support in terms of implementing and planning the reforms. That's definitely going to result in a more successful and impactful program.
Thank you so much, Delphine. That was super clear. And as I've seen in the notes, people are asking for our presentation. So would appreciate, would you mind sharing with us? I would be happy to share with everybody else as well. Thank you so much. For sake of time, we're just going to move a little bit faster. Our colleagues from Senegal, Mr. Ndiaye, are you here? Mr. Ndiaye. Don't see him. So we're going to move to Togo. Monsieur Akaya, I know you are here and ready to go. So please go ahead and share your screen. You are able to do that.
Merci beaucoup, Frida. Est-ce que je peux avoir l'occasion de partager mon écran, s'il te plaît? Mais je n'ai pas les options, en fait. Peut-être...
Please go below to share screen. You should be able to.
Ok, parfait. Donc là, je vais essayer de partager mon écran. Oh. Je ne sais pas si vous avez tous accès à mon écran.
Yes, we can see your slides.
Ok, donc merci beaucoup pour cette invitation pour sur le G20 Compact africain. Je vais aller très vite vu qu'on n'a pas beaucoup de temps. Donc, vous avez posé effectivement 3 questions. Ce qui a bien fonctionné dans le processus de mise en œuvre des réformes au Togo et les leçons tirées. En effet, vous êtes tous au courant des différentes prouesses du Togo sur les 5 dernières années, notamment le fait que le Togo a été en 2020 le premier pays africain réformateur et 3e pays mondial le plus réformateur. Et ceci a été possible grâce à un engagement très, très ferme du gouvernement pour impulser les réformes, notamment dans des secteurs spécifiques comme la création des entreprises, le traitement des permis de construction, l'obtention de l'électricité, l'enrichissement des titres de propriété, l'accès au crédit. Et dans tous ces secteurs, le Togo a fait des bonds assez impressionnants. Et ce qui a permis au Togo de gagner pratiquement plus de 59 places sur 2 exercices. Aussi, en matière de climat des affaires, et de manière globale, il faut dire que les réformes qui ont été menées ont permis au Togo d'attirer des investissements directs étrangers de manière phénoménale. Et notamment, nous sommes passés pratiquement de 191 milliards d'IDE en 2019 à plus de 352 milliards en 2020. Et donc, nous étions le premier pays au monde qui a attiré le plus d'IDE par rapport à la taille de son économie. Donc, ceci a été possible grâce au code foncier qui a été mis en œuvre, mais aussi le coût des investissements qui a été très attrayant pour l'ensemble de ces investisseurs. Il faut aussi noter sur les 2 dernières années toutes les réformes que le Togo a su mener pour justement accroître le commerce dans le commerce, notamment le Togo est une plateforme logistique, notamment par le port, mais aussi l'aéroport. Et toute la plateforme de transport, les différents corridors, Lomé-Ouagadougou, mais aussi Abidjan-Lagos, qui ont été très bien développés de sorte à ce que le Togo puisse jouer pleinement ce rôle de pays qui dessert les pays de l'Interland. Mais aussi des projets aussi très, très importants qui ont permis justement d'accroître la production industrielle avec la mise en place de la plateforme industrielle d'Adétikopé et le port sec d'Adétikopé. C'est des projets transformateurs qui permettent justement de transformer des produits qui étaient normalement exportés de façon brute, mais qui aujourd'hui sont transformés sur place, les produits comme le coton, le soja, les noix de cajou, qui aujourd'hui ont des industries de transformation dans notre pays. Aussi, sur la question des finances publiques, nous avons été aussi très, très avant-gardistes sur les réformes, notamment sur la programmation et l'exécution budgétaire, mais aussi sur le contrôle des finances publiques et la comptabilité et la gestion de la trésorerie et surtout la digitalisation des services publics, parce que ça, c'est un élément très important sur lequel nous avons pris une option sérieuse, notamment en essayant de digitaliser tous les services de paiement des impôts, mais aussi au niveau de la douane. Et aujourd'hui, plusieurs services publics sont déjà digitalisés et ceci permet justement de réduire la corruption, mais surtout d'être de délivrer des services de façon assez accélérée. Nous avons aussi complètement réformé le cadre juridique de la commande publique, ce qui a permis aussi de faciliter le partenariat public-privé et ceci permet justement, comme je l'ai déjà dit, d'accélérer l'attraction des investissements directs étrangers dans notre pays. Alors, les leçons apprises, concrètement, moi, je voulais dire une chose qui a été déjà dite d'ailleurs par la première présentatrice, c'est le leadership de très haut niveau. Dans notre pays, le leadership sur la conduite des réformes est piloté, je dirais, par le président de la République lui-même. Et ceci se fait par des cellules. Il y a la cellule climat des affaires qui est directement rattachée au président de la République et chaque matin, la cellule doit déposer sur la table du président de la République l'état d'avancement des réformes et les goulots d'étranglement éventuels. Et justement, à un niveau plus décentralisé, avec le ministère de l'Économie et des Finances, nous avons le secrétariat permanent chargé des réformes que j'ai l'honneur de présider et qui aujourd'hui aussi fait le suivi opérationnel de l'ensemble de ces réformes, mais surtout aussi les réformes finances publiques. Et ensuite, dans le cadre du partenariat avec les réformes, des réformes avec l'Allemagne, le ministère du Plan qui coordonne cette action. Il faut aussi préciser qu'en termes de leçons apprises pour avoir tous ces succès, il faut nécessairement aligner l'ensemble des réformes sur une stratégie nationale parce qu'il ne faut pas distinguer les réformes de ce que veut le pays. Les réformes, c'est d'abord pour le pays, c'est d'abord pour les Togolais, c'est d'abord pour le gouvernement. On ne fait pas les réformes pour les partenaires, c'est d'abord pour transformer le pays et c'est très important de pouvoir mettre en cohérence l'ensemble de ces réformes. Et si par ricochet, ça apporte des financements, tant mieux, mais c'est surtout pour améliorer les conditions de vie des populations. La deuxième leçon importante que nous avons tirée aussi de la mise en œuvre des réformes, c'est surtout de la sensibilisation. Et ça, c'est quelque chose de très important, la sensibilisation à travers des cas de concertation. Et aujourd'hui, nous avons plusieurs cas de concertation, dont le plus dynamique, c'est le cas de concertation entre l'État et le secteur privé. Et qui est ce cas de concertation est présidé par le Premier ministre. Et chaque 2 mois, le Premier ministre rencontre les acteurs du secteur privé pour discuter des difficultés que le secteur privé rencontre dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre de ces actions et quelles sont les actions idoines quelles sont les initiatives les plus transformatrices que nous devons prendre pour faciliter l'action du secteur privé. Et à un niveau plus décentralisé, le ministre des Finances préside le secrétariat technique de ce cadre de concertation en essayant de voir comment implémenter toutes les directives du Premier ministre dans le cadre de ces réunions et donc les transformer peut-être en arrêtés, en décisions ou des choses assez pragmatiques pour que le secteur privé puisse s'émanciper au quotidien. Troisième leçon aussi apprise dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre de ces réformes, c'est la nécessité de souvent faire le diagnostic. Souvent, on n'a pas le recul nécessaire pour faire les diagnostics, pour essayer d'identifier les meilleures réformes. Mais nous pensons que c'est important de chaque fois se remettre en cause pour voir quelles sont les dynamiques les plus importantes à dessiner et les outils comme le PFA, le PMFA, le DEMPA, le PIMA, que vous connaissez sûrement tous, sont des outils, nous pensons, très importants. Là, le Togo a déjà lancé le processus PFA que nous sommes en train de gérer de sorte à ce que nous puissions vraiment identifier les réformes qui restent. Et dernière leçon, c'est le suivi au quotidien des réformes. Nous avons un principe, chaque 15 jours, nous devons recevoir toutes les administrations pour voir l'état d'avancement des réformes et rendre compte à l'autorité. Donc, c'est systématisé et aujourd'hui, nous sommes en train complètement de digitaliser le système de suivi avec l'ensemble des points focaux au niveau des ministères, mais au niveau des institutions aussi qui sont impliquées dans la mise en œuvre des réformes. En termes de défis, je pense que c'est assez clair. Nous avons la menace sécurité. Oui. Non, oui, je vais vite. En termes de défis, je pense qu'il y a la menace sécuritaire, l'augmentation du coût de vie entraînée par la guerre en Ukraine, la mobilisation des ressources, le changement climatique, mais aussi la création d'emplois par rapport à la pandémie et puis l'amélioration du climat des affaires et le besoin de renforcement des capacités des acteurs. Pour pouvoir pour faire face, je pense qu'il y a quelque chose que vous devez nous aider à faire, c'est de mieux communiquer sur les réformes de nos pays auprès des agences de crédit export de l'OCDE afin de faciliter les financements. Parce que nous faisons beaucoup d'efforts au niveau des pays pour mener les réformes, mais ces réformes ne sont pas assez relayées au niveau des personnes avec lesquelles nous commerçons. Et aujourd'hui, les crédits sont très chers pour nos pays et le secteur privé n'arrive pas forcément à avoir comme terrain propice nos pays. Et ça, c'est très important que nous puissions trouver le cadre propice pour le faire. Et je pense qu'il faut aussi initier des rencontres avec les acteurs du secteur privé des pays du G20. Ça, c'est très important parce que je pense qu'à l'origine, c'était ça, c'était de mener des réformes pour que les acteurs des pays du G20 puissent investir dans nos pays et il faut pouvoir trouver dans ce cadre de discussion le moyen d'attirer ce secteur privé pour qu'on puisse communiquer sur nos réformes et leur permettre de financer notre économie. Ensuite, je pense qu'il faut aussi diversifier les sources de financement de nos pays parce que là, on est resté très, très focus sur du financement traditionnel. Je pense qu'il faut ouvrir la vanne de financement en essayant d'attirer plus de fonds d'investissement, plus de fonds de pension, plus de fonds de capital à risque, plus de fonds d'equity au profit des PME-PMI de notre pays. Et ensuite, certains collègues l'ont déjà dit, c'est de renforcer les relations bilatérales avec chaque pays du G20 pour mieux développer la coopération technique et financière, notamment par des appuis budgétaires et des emprunts dans le projet. Donc voilà, de manière très brève, ce que je voulais partager avec tous les pays et je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Akaya. I know there's a lot and 5 minutes is challenging to put everything in, so please bear with us. We are running very close to time and we have still our final country, Tunisia, as well as 2 of our expert colleagues. So we understand that some people do have to leave us, but if you don't, we would like to borrow about 20 more minutes of your time, if possible. These conversations are really, really engaging and eye-opening. So without much further ado, I'm going to come to Tunisia. Mr. Mohammed, are you here?
Yes, I am, Frida.
Okay.
Do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
I wonder if I can share some slides with you. I've just sent them to you, but if I have the possibility to share.
Yes, you should.
I'll try to be as quick as possible.
Please look at the link in the. Okay, please try now.
Yes. Is that okay? You see the presentation? Okay. So it's difficult to speak after all these prominent and eloquent people. I really appreciated the different presentations, and I see that there are similarities, but also some specificities among Compact with Africa countries. I tried to cover briefly the three questions that have been asked: what has worked, what needs to be improved, and how can Compact be better structured? As regarding the points that have worked well, in the case of Tunisia, we have two main points, three mechanisms, and two main milestones. Technical preparation and design of reforms has been quite helpful in our case, going through relevant benchmarks and lessons learned from other countries. And this has been achieved through the provision of technical assistance from Compact with Africa Multi-Donor Fund. I think this is a Tunisian specificity that we have already had the chance to share bilaterally with some of our Compact with Africa peers. It's a multi-donor fund that has been established with the help of the World Bank, up to $6 million, which has allowed for mobilizing technical assistance and relevant support in key reform areas. Of course, along with provision of technical assistance, capacity building through our usual bilateral cooperation and multilateral cooperation with our development partners. But this Compact with Africa Fund, as we call it, has been so far very relevant and very helpful in pushing forward Compact-related reforms. The second basic successful point is the donor coordination. As you know, the need for donor coordination has become more and more important, especially when you have different projects, different initiatives, and the need to undertake some traffic management, if I may say so, to make sure that all of those interventions do complement each other, converge to national priorities, and not go into duplication or even conflict situations. So it's very important to pay more attention to this donor coordination aspect. With the help of this coordination, we were successful to undertake regular update of our Compact with Africa policy matrix, to at the same time coordinate it with other budget support programs that we are implementing with our donors. And this update included reflecting on the progress made for ongoing reforms, adding new structural reforms, and consolidation with other initiatives. We were also successful to implement a digitized solution to ensure this coordination and to enable day-to-day monitoring of ongoing reforms and to underpin any obstacles or any difficulties, because there are many stakeholders, many government institutions that have to do that homework. And if for any reason there is a bottleneck or a problem, then we have the possibility to know about it and to take the correct measures. So all this is helping us implementing our national reform program, which has been announced in June, last June. which is a comprehensive program that will help Tunisia go out from the current difficult economic situation, and also to finalize negotiations and reach an agreement with IMF, discussions which are ongoing now, and hopefully we will arrive to an agreement and to finalize those negotiations successfully. Under the compact, we have a list of ongoing projects that have direct technical support to specific areas of reform. I won't go through all of them. You have the list mentioned, but they are structured in three windows, as we call them. Window one is technical assistance to the compact task force itself. Window two is technical assistance to ministries and agencies implementing compact-related reforms. And window three is for communication and marketing on reforms and on investment opportunities. What needs to be improved? I think there is need to strengthen reform monitoring. It's never enough to ensure this monitoring because it's complex and there are many stakeholders, and the need for monitoring and arbitration in some cases seems to be more and more needed. Secondly, support change management, because all reforms are accompanied by change management, and it's not always sure to have everybody on board. There's some resistance. This is a human nature, if I say so, but when you would like to transform, you need to explain, to convince, and to manage that change successfully, because at the end of the day, the final target is a common one. It's a national program that has to be implemented successfully, and it's really important to establish a real policy of change management at all levels.
Sorry, Mr. Mohammed, just 1 more minute.
I'm finishing right now. So how can the compact be structured to better support? I think it's already for us a time to think the next step after closing of the multi-donor fund, because it's finishing by December of next year, and we still have to accelerate the implementation of some technical assistance programs, but also to think about new ones before the deadline. We also need to work on financing and of investment opportunities. There are many investment opportunities coming up, either from the Compact with Africa process itself, or from our development strategies and new programs. So we need, I think, more support in finding the adequate technical and financial support for those programs. Regional integration needs to be stressed further. There's already some peer-to-peer or bilateral exchange of experience among compact countries, but in line with the ongoing efforts to ensure more regional integration on the trade liberalization or other initiatives, I think there's more effort to be done to help boost this regional integration. And finally, we need to focus on a few sectors to make interventions more efficient and more effective. For example, green economy, digitization, climate protection, education, which is really a permanent priority for all African countries. With that, I will have finished. Thank you for your attention.
Great, thank you so much. And those were some really great suggestions there. We will take note of that. So with that, we have come to the end of our country discussion. Apologies, I know you feel a little bit rushed, but we're excited to see that countries have so much to share. I think we might have to have a part 2 of this, just so that we can hear more from you. But Vincent, I'd like to invite you to just briefly summarize for us some of the key points that we've heard, the homework that we'll be doing before we move on to our two final speakers.
Thank you, Frida. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I'm going to be very quick, which is not going to give justice to the amazing insights we've just heard from almost from 11 out of 12 compact countries. That's why we are doing the recording. So I think it's going to be very important for us to really document and synthesize what we've heard. And thanks God, there is a recording and we've all been taking a lot of notes. So I will just share a few, high-level takeaways at this point, but this is really, just a glimpse of what we've heard. First of all, I mean, this discussion really shows that the Compact is really a club of reform-minded countries. I mean, we were reminded time and time again of the amazing reform achievements the Compact countries have achieved, which have been documented through the monitoring reports, but to hear it live, it's really impressive. And therefore, because you've been reforming, you have a lot of positive lessons to share. And they do echo very well what we've heard from Frida. So for example, importance of leadership, that was Togo. The importance of monitoring mentioned by everybody, but Benin, Rwanda, Togo, Tunisia, importance of interacting with stakeholders, Morocco, Ethiopia, Togo, importance to have some coordination mechanism connected to the top, and that takes various, there's a committee in Morocco, there's a special ministry in Côte d'Ivoire, but every time the Ministry of Finance plays a central role. But you do have this kind of coordination and committee mechanism which connects the leadership with the various ministries. So I think we've heard a lot of very interesting lessons, which goes back to what we've heard from Sylvia. Also interesting to see that most countries are really putting the Compact with Africa reform marches at the heart of their economic development strategy. So it's not a sideshow, it's really part of the heart. In terms of recommendations for the Compact going forward, so some really interesting suggestions. First of all, increase the visibility, spell out the additionality, and the additionality can come up in many different ways. We've heard the very successful bilateral agreements between a number of Compact countries and Germany for the main part. That was the case in Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana. It was also the interesting case of education, which also included France, and I believe that was a story of Benin. So the Compact is also an opportunity to deepen bilateral relationships and therefore benefits between Compact countries and G20 partners. Also, it was mentioned the Compact should do more to help Compact countries to promote private investments and connect with G20 private investors. That was a point made by Togo, which I think is going to resonate. And it's certainly something we need to think about going forward. The value of peer learning has been emphasized, and also in the context of regional integration and trying to harmonize policies between countries. This point was made by Egypt and Tunisia. Then the Compact was also seen as the expression which was used, I believe, by Guinea was to be a bridge between the Compact countries and the partners, and really this idea of coordination platform, which was also mentioned by Tunisia. So having the Compact help mobilize and coordinate partners. And then finally, leverage the Compact to help with the actual implementation of reforms, provide the incentives for reforms, but also the technical, mobilize technical expertise for the reforms. That was mentioned by Benin, Ethiopia, Morocco, Rwanda, and we've heard the case of Tunisia, which actually formalized this through a compact-specific multi-donor trust fund. So again, this is not exhaustive, it's just to give some glimpse of how rich this conversation is, and we are so grateful to all our speakers and participants. Over to you, Frida. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vincent. That was a great summary, and we have a lot of homework to do. So without much further ado, let me go over to our colleague Janat Hassad from McKinsey & Company. Janat, we are stealing a little bit of your time, but I hope we can still hear from you. Janat is an associate partner at McKinsey, and she focuses on economic development for public institutions. And her areas of focus are investment promotion, which many of us have discussed today. So Janat, over to you.
Thank you very much, Frida, and I'm very honored to be participating to this discussion. I think we need to mute.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Yes. So I'll be sharing my screen, and I know that we're running over time, so I'll try to be quick, but I just wanted to share a few thoughts with you related to the discussions that we've heard today. And actually, we've heard a lot of best practices, and I'm very impressed by all the achievements that the countries have shared. So the topic that I wanted to discuss with you today is what are the best practices in order to support execution of public sector's reforms while leveraging best practices from private sector transformation. So the recipe that I will be sharing with you today is largely inspired by what we have observed as best practices from private sector transformations. So I'll skip a few of the pages because most of the topics have been covered earlier, but I'll try to focus on the 5 key points that I wanted to share with you, and some of them were already mentioned by my colleagues earlier, but also by the different countries participants. So if we think about the 5 key success factors that allow an implementation to be successful for reforms at country level, we've listed 5 of them. The very first one, at the origin of implementation and reform, is prioritizing, right? So having a set of priority projects and reform with clear accountabilities is key, and is really a key enabler and starting point in order to make sure that the delivery will be a success. So we heard a lot from the colleagues about the reform matrix. So it's indeed an efficient tool, and the idea here is to make sure that the portfolio of project priorities is clear and that it's aligned with the budget. So this is a very first enabler that is very important. The second key ingredient is to set up a competent DU, so delivery unit, at the highest level. So we've heard a lot about the strong sponsorship that is required, the importance of having a clear mandate of this delivery unit in order to drive the implementation of the priority projects and reform. And I will share a bit more details about how it can be set up and structured and so on a bit later. The third one is to put in place a robust tracking monitoring process. And again, we've seen some very interesting examples from the countries, and I'll be sharing an example of how we do it in order to also share another experience with you. Fourth one is to ensure the right governance mechanism, which is very much related to the number 3. So you need to have this tracking process that is robust, but also have the right governance in place in order to make sure that you can track the implementation. And then, of course, something that cannot be neglected is to build capabilities, ensure that change is happening within the delivery units across the ministries in order to drive execution. And this is very much related to also a transparent communication and a clear communication plan around the transformation. So please allow me to give a bit more details on some of these, and I hope these make sense to you. On the role of the delivery unit, I will not go through all the page, but there is one message that I wanted to share with you that is very important, is that the delivery unit role is different from a PMO role, right? So the role of the PMO would be mostly to track the progress of the initiative, while the role of a delivery unit is to help accelerate the implementation and solve the roadblocks. So usually when we see a PMO entity, this posture of being also seen as an expert or an entity that can help solve roadblocks, escalate arbitration is not part of the role. So this is for me the clear differentiation between what we call a delivery unit that is really enforced to accelerate implementation versus a PMO, which is mostly seen as a policeman tracking implementation, right? So this is the first shift that we need to understand about delivery units, is this key differentiation in the role versus a PMO that is simply tracking the initiative. So the delivery unit will be challenging, will be solving, will be providing expertise. So the role is going a bit beyond that. And another key element here is ensuring overall consistency, but also a good collaboration between all the departments that are involved. So this will also be a key differentiating role for the delivery unit. Second thing that I want to share, I'll skip the structure, is the evidence that the delivery units can drive success. So you have here a list of examples. Some of the colleagues have shared some, but I wanted to insist here on the different types of positioning, right? So the delivery unit can be positioned centrally at the government level, always reporting to the highest level of the state, but it can also be positioned at program level, at ministry level, for example. And you see here the mandates of the delivery units that are listed that are very different. It can be a mandate of, for example, implementing the presidential electoral program, which was the case in Chile. It can be, for example, having a mandate of modernizing public state. It can have a mandate of delivering a country roadmap. So delivery units can have different mandates and positioned at different levels, but they do drive change and have some impact. And we'll be sharing these elements with you offline, so you will have more time to go into all the details and these examples. And on the delivery units, the other key thing to have in mind is that, and again, this has been mentioned a lot by my colleagues earlier, is that it needs a strong sponsorship. And I insist on this, and you see on this page a few examples where the delivery units were dissolved, discontinued with the change in political leadership, with the loss of sponsorship. So definitely the sponsorship and being anchored at a high level of the state is clearly important. And these examples just illustrate to what extent it's important. So you see a few dissolutions and discontinuations that were related to change of power or loss of sponsorship, right? Now on the third point, on the tracking mechanism, I think it's important, and then I'll stop. I just wanted to share the best practices in order to come up with a strong delivery mechanism. What you see here is first the level of granularity that you need to have for your priority projects, right? So I mentioned earlier that it's key to have a set of priorities, but then this set of priorities, which is around 40, 50 key priorities, needs to be broken down into very concrete initiatives in order to make it trackable. So this is what you see as an illustration on the screen. So you can have 30, 60 strategic projects, but then it will come up to a few thousand very detailed initiatives with clear milestones, clear deadline, that we will be able actually to monitor, because the level of strategic project is very high level. And in order to make it easier for the monitoring, the way to make it more granular is very helpful. And the idea then, I just wanted to illustrate how to go through this process. The illustrations that you have here is an illustration of a validation process for the progress of all the initiatives. So at each level, at each operational program, project level, it's very important to be able to track very clearly with a codified, formalized methodology what is actually the status for this project. Because I think you can all relate, when you try to track progress of your initiatives, it's very difficult to apply a status. Is it late? Is it on time? Is it delivered? And actually the example here that you have in front of you helps codify the different level and the different stages of progress that the whole roadmap can get, and it makes it way easier to track implementation. And this has been used, as I said, in private sector, public sector, and proven to work. So the message here is to make sure to have a clear funnel or a clear definition for all the progress stages. Finally, I just wanted to close on the governance, which is one of the key ingredients that I mentioned earlier. The governance can be done at multiple levels, and we've seen some examples that were provided by the colleagues earlier, but typically you have different levels. The project level, which is the ministry level, then you have the authority level at prime minister or president level, which are very important to secure at a very high frequency in order to make sure that everything is tracked and again ensure the strong sponsorship. So I'll stop here, and I'm very happy to share some of the content that I shared today offline, and also maybe answer any questions that you might have later on or offline through Frida.
Thank you so much, Anat. Some great gems in there that, again, I think we'll have to dive into and probably tear apart and discuss more in another session. I'll move on to our colleague, Stephen. Next, Stephen, you should have the ability to share your screen. Stephen is a government expert with substantial change, delivery, and reform experience within the UK government. He was a civil servant for over 20 years in the Cabinet Office at the very center of government, basically delivering very complex national and international programs. And so he comes with a lot of public sector experience, similar to many of our colleagues on the call. So over to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Frida. Can you hear me? You can.
Yes, we can hear you, and we can see your presence.
Well, again, I'm going to be very brief. I've found very fascinating to hear your journeys this afternoon with reform. Anyone who works in the public sector knows it's not easy, and you spend most of your time going backwards, but a few nuggets of going forward is always to be welcomed, and I find that sharing what works has been very helpful to me. So I joined the civil service in 1988, and I worked in a lot of reform units, but they never seemed to get anything done. They didn't actually achieve any reform. And the first real delivery unit that actually broke the barrier, shall we say, to actually drive things was the Prime Minister's Delivery Unit, which Jeanette has touched on in her presentation. This was set up by Tony Blair, our Prime Minister, in 2001. His second term of office, he too, like a lot of civil servants, was frustrated that no reform was happening, despite him being elected with a very large mandate. So he identified 17 priorities out of our around 8% of our sort of national priorities, our public service agreements that should be fast-tracked and actually delivered. Mainly there were reductions in waiting times or making sure the trains ran on times, but he wanted a unit that would actually achieve what he wanted, actually a reduction in times or improvements in quality. So the prerequisites for his reform were obviously he gave that prime ministerial mandate, and that message was shot across government. The cabinet knew, and the cabinet were all on side. In terms of leadership, what came across to me in terms of the head of the delivery unit, they had to get the right person, and the person they appointed, a guy called Michael Barber, was actually someone which is quite unusual in Whitehall or the civil service at the centre of government at the time, had actually had experience of delivery in education. So he was very well suited to doing the task. He was also very collaborative, and he worked on a sort of win-win basis with stakeholders. Prioritisation, I mentioned that. Accountability, we needed to ensure that those priorities that were identified were actually owned and accountable by the secretaries of state. So there was no wriggle room for them to say, well, that's not down to me, that's down to X. So accountability and that mandate needed to be very clear. Engagement, remember this was 2001, so consultation wasn't really a real big issue for us in those days. But engagement has become a very substantial part of, and conversations with business in particular, become a very substantial part of the dialogue of actually identifying what works or where the problems are. So it was very important in the early days for Michael Barber to ensure that all the key big satellites of government, the finance ministry, policy unit in 10 Downing Street and the wider cabinet office were all on side. So that, and then contracting, this final point, obviously there was a lot of fear and suspicion about what the delivery unit would do. So Michael Barber, the head of the unit, gave a contract, signed a contract for each of the departments that these PSA agreements were in, to tell them what they would do and what they wouldn't do. So what they would do is not interfere in the accountability, i.e. The department was responsible for the delivery, but they would help provide support. And if the department got it right, the department would take the credit. If the department got it wrong, the department would also get the flack. So it's been a key factor of any government I've worked in, is that if something goes really well, the Prime Minister jumps in and takes the credit for it. This was a new model and a new approach. So just looking very briefly, he sat before the cabinet and he said, what's your aspiration and ambition? What do you want to achieve? And obviously every cabinet member wanted to do everything. Everything is a priority. But he argued that resources are finite. I'm sure you'll recognize that, and that there is no way that you can make everything a priority. You know, if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. He borrowed a quote from the author Karen Martin. So what he argued was that we were in the framework here of improved outcomes. So making the existing systems work better by identifying marginal gains and identifying blockages. So he began by developing the foundation, which, as I discussed, was on the previous page, really understanding and getting the centre of government and the whole of government on the side. Delivery capacity review, that was more about understanding what the system was good at doing and what it wasn't good at doing. So understanding where the challenges were likely to come from. Then for each of those priorities, understanding the delivery challenge. So they developed tools called a priority view, where they would do a very fast review of where the issues were, what the outcome was, where the issues were, what needed to change, engaging the entire delivery chain. So from the cabinet minister at the top to the teacher maybe at the bottom, or the train driver at the bottom. So it was very fast, very intense. So not typical Whitehall and bogging down the system in bureaucracy. Then there was a delivery plan. So this was, as Jeanette said, isn't sort of your typical program or project management office. The plan was based on looking at the data in terms of customer performance. So waiting lists were at 40,000 for people waiting for more than a year, and they would base their trajectory in terms of performance on what was happening in real time and what they needed to get it to reduce it down, as they did, by 30,000, and then looking at actions that they could take that would marginally gain and improve the system. And they did it. So data was driving this. And then the driving delivery, monitoring routines. So again, outlined some key ones. Prime Minister Tony Blair would spend 2.5 hours a week on this agenda. He would have monthly meetings. There'd be quarterly one-to-ones with cabinet ministers, and a biannual report, which was red, amber, or green for each of the 17, This wasn't published. I noticed Sylvia mentioned the Indian example of their reform team where they actually published their performance. So that was a powerful lever, but Tony Blair didn't want to go that far. He didn't want to publish our kind of sort of our dirty linen, shall we say, but he wanted, but it had a very powerful lever of driving up change. And then fifth, and this for me is the most important, is the creating the irreversible delivery culture. So actual learning and teaching, and like today, sharing examples of what's worked. And that had, from my perspective of working in government, an absolute massive transformational impact across the entire system in terms of improving our skills and capability. It's as simple as that. So moving forward a few years, so legacy, I worked in these both of these units. So improving the business environment. We're very much around, the UK is very much around simplifying our structures and our regulatory rulemaking and our regulatory delivery. So our two delivery units use a lot of the tools from the Blair years, and there's the cutting red tape example there where we've engaged business in the rulemaking system to identify what needs to be simplified, and those are the examples of the impact. On the right here, we have a regulators code. So that is a statutory code that sets out how regulators should engage with and enforce regulation. Because of that, we identified was becoming very burdensome and inconsistent across the country. Finally, legacy shared learning. So, you know, the model has been used across the world. Sorry, got a bit of a mishap in the middle there. You know, so there are 6 principles there. Make sure there's highly visible political backing, tight remit, physical locations at the very centre. So the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Finance, the head of ministry, or the top of the office within whatever organisation you are. The hiring strategy needs to be right. You need to get the right people in. These need to be very good people. And ensuring that cross-government ownership has been vital. And then putting those routines in place, they're kind of like just basic things to make sure that you monitor what needs to get done, and that if it's not done, what's going to happen. And I would also add there that engagement and consultation has become, if you like, a foundation to actually ensure that things happen quickly. So that's it from me. Thank you for listening. I'm very happy to share these slides and answer any questions you may have. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Stephen. That was great, short and crisp, but a lot of nuggets in there that I think were really fundamental to this, and very much appreciate that. Just want to say thank you to everyone for staying with us. We are 30 minutes over time. So I am going to quickly end by just sharing a few reminders. One, I know that in the last AAG meeting, hello? Yes, in the last AAG meeting, we were asked to, or countries were asked to send official feedback to the CWA team. I believe you may have received emails to that effect, but just in case you didn't, this feedback is due at the end of August, and you may send it to this email, which I will be happy to send to you, but cwa@bmf.bund.de, copying our German colleagues. And then finally, we've already had two peer learning events in these short few weeks. Acknowledging that the next few weeks a lot of people are going to be on vacation, but what we would like to do, since the whole issue of investment promotion and actually getting private sector in the room is so critical, we would like to have, if possible, the next event focused on investment promotion. And so we would love to hear from you. I think Tunisia mentioned, specific sectors of focus. We would like to hear from you who should be in the room. Is it, people from your investment promotion councils? Are there specific, parts of private sector that are focused for you? We would like to co-create this session with you. And if possible, it would be great for it to be in person. So please stay tuned for additional information on that, and let us know, if you have any suggestions for that. Vincent, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Before thanking you, Frida, and everybody else, I just wanted to specify this official feedback, which has been requested at the last AAG meeting, which was in May, to the compact. It's feedback. It's really what we mean by feedback is suggestions to improve the compact going forward. So of course, learning from what has worked and what didn't work in the past, but we are really interested in your ideas going forward. So it's really official suggestions for how the compact can be even more helpful or more helpful to you. And I think this workshop was extremely helpful in generating so many great suggestions and ideas. So please feel free to use what we took away from this workshop to inform your suggestions that you will be sending to the compact at this email address before the end of August. And we will circulate a quick summary of what we took away, as well as the recording. So that may also help you formulate these suggestions for the future of the compact. So wanted to thank you again, and especially Frida, you've been amazing, Frida. It's the compact owes you so much. So wanted to say thank you to Frida.
And Vincent as well. They have also, and all of our World Bank and AfDB colleagues who have also
And
been.
Claudia, Claudia had to leave us. I also wanted to express special thanks to Claudia, and of course to our guest star speakers, Sylvia, Timothy, and Janate.
Exactly. And thank you so much to all our country participants. We appreciate you taking the time. I think I owe Vincent a Coke because he told us that it should be 2 hours. And I was like, no, we can do this in an hour and a half. I think our next sessions will have to be 2 hours.
So here's the good news. We are still 41 participants connected 40 minutes after the official end of the workshop. That's quite amazing. The peak number was 59 participants at 9:35. So that's a good sign. And thank you so much to everybody for staying late.
Yes, and please, Phil, you should see a survey on your screen now. Please quickly fill the survey for us before you leave. Thank you again so very much, and we will be in contact via email. Have a wonderful day, everyone.